Today, I wanted to go over some strategies with students for avoiding what I call the dreaded C strikes errors. These are errors that by the time you are at Devlin or shortly thereafter, we want to make sure you avoid all the time. Basically, there are several C strikes infractions, and I used to call them three strikes infractions because after three such strikes, I would often turn a paper back to students and ask them to revise, proofread, and make it more presentable for submission. But a few things that can cause you to lose points, substantial credit on any assignment, especially formal ones, are these kinds of things. If you are missing a works cited sheet and it is a requirement of the assignment, or you have cited from any novel, short story, poem, etc., it is expected that your in text or your parenthetical citations refer to some source in a works cited sheet. And I will give you more information about how to do a proper works cited sheet. Always remember that Purdue OWL has a number of samples that would be good for you to look at. Anytime you quote from a book or cite textual evidence from a book and do not include parenthetical citations with the page, or in the case of drama or poetry, line numbers, you have committed a pretty serious infraction. One thing after ninth grade that we do not expect to see anymore is incorrect title punctuation. This is something kids have been learning for a number of years. I always just remind myself that anything that's particularly large, the name of a ship, the name of a large novel or a collection of works or an encyclopedia or a movie, those are all almost always italicized. Now, some kids will underline, which is what is appropriate if you are handwriting, but if you are ever typing your text, then you will want to italicize. Smaller works like chapters in a book or the name of a poem or perhaps a song that's in an album would only have quotation marks around it. It's really important that you make this distinction. If you put Old Man and the Sea in quotation marks, that would be incorrect. It is a novel and should be labeled as such with italicized title. One thing that is concerning certainly is when students misspell the names of authors or characters. Generally, you're writing with the book right near you, or it's something that you can easily check. So putting two M's in Hemingway or misspelling Santiago's or Manilyn's name is kind of silly when all you would have to do is just open the book or look at the title and or the cover page to find out how to spell it correctly. That just looks like laziness. One thing that's really important and that kids often try to do is that they leave their quotations standing alone. In other words, they're not embedding them into their own sentences. This is an issue because part of the craft of writing is making sure that the writing flows. And when you leave quotes standing alone, and by that I mean that that sentence starts with a quotation and ends with a quotation, and there's no writing of your own, then it seems to me that you have left out important context. I usually indicate this problem with something that looks like this. This is me showing like a wall on either side of this quotation that's standing alone. I have another presentation which I'll share with you next week called How to Analyze Quotations Without Using This Quote Shows, and How to Embed Quotations Without Creating Grammatical Errors. Any kind of typing errors that you could have corrected by running spell check or simply proofreading using the words that you know, or if you don't know and you don't know where a comma goes, maybe it's time to look up where and how to use commas, either in the grammar book that's been provided to you or through Purdue OWL, which stands for Purdue Online Writing Lab. And at this point, one problem that kids are having, because many students text with their thumbs or write very quickly and carefully or rely on autocorrect, it's really important that before you submit any document to an instructor or to a boss or frankly anywhere, you would want to make sure that you've proofread, avoiding any symbols, abbreviations, lowercase letters for sentence beginnings, anything that you learned not to do in early elementary school. Basically, a few things that you want to avoid in formal papers are contractions, don't, couldn't, wouldn't, shouldn't, You know what? You might as well just sort of go ahead and type out that word. We talk like that. It's kind of colloquial for us to run our words together and be too lazy to say, I didn't have it, or we're too lazy to say, I did not have breakfast. So we're like, what'd you have for breakfast this morning? I didn't have anything. You don't write like that. You need to remove those contractions and write the words out. One problem you always want to proofread for once or twice in a read through before you submit anything, especially in your English class, is inconsistent verb tense. Go back and make sure that all your verbs are in actually the present tense. We write about literature in the present tense. The way I remember that is I always think to myself that as you're reading a book or novel, it's sort of unfolding right there in front of you. This can be confusing, and I will show you ways to sort of alter this if the verb tense in the book is in the past. But generally, we want to move our writing into the present tense and keep it consistent. We also want to avoid the first or second person in formal writings. First person, I, we, us, is just a little bit too informal, and it takes the focus off of your argument, I think, and places it more on you. When kids are like, I think, I believe, it seems to me, it's almost like they're softening an argument. So let's just leave first person out unless you are writing a personal paper. Second person has no place in formal English writings. Second person uses you and is usually reserved for instructions. First, you take the peanut butter and you spread it on the bread. Then you add the jelly. Do not use this in formal writings. That may seem obvious, but what I see very often is kids will often revert to the second person in a conclusion, like this. They'll be writing a whole paper and then all of a sudden they'll say, as they're stating theme, it's really important that you see how determination can change your life when you are faced with a great challenge, like Santiago in Old Man and the Sea. Instead, it takes a little crafting, but instead, you might say readers readers. I think readers or generally people can feel this way, or one might learn from the novel, but let's try to keep you out of it. I always say, once you use you can't ever stop. It's really the truth. Please, at this point, if you are not sure of apostrophe use, or if I mark this in any of your documents, it's really important that you review this word. Apostrophes are used to show possession. The dog's fur, D-O-G apostrophe S. Or if you have several dogs, the dog's backyard, D-O-G-S apostrophe. But just having several dogs does not warrant an apostrophe. I have two dogs, D-O-G-S, no apostrophe. That's a plural, not a possessive. A few other things that you want to make sure as Devlin writers we avoid in the future is summarizing instead of arguing. We're going to work a lot on that this year. It is never your job to just sort of tell me what the book is about. Instead, you're going to draw some conclusions and analyze elements of these materials. And so I want you to learn to argue instead of summarize. We're going to really work on not proving the obvious or stating, you don't want to state facts. A lot of kids their freshman year might start a paragraph with, Santiago is an old man who has a young friend named Manolin. That's summary. That is a fact. No one's going to argue against. Instead, what those sentences might have more argument in them. Santiago is the most important role model in Manolin's life, for instance, might be a better, a more arguable stance. A lot of kids feel like they can kind of use MLA when it's convenient and not when it's not. I had a master's thesis returned to me for a colon, one punctuation mark. Other than that, it was perfect. You cannot avoid using MLA, which is essentially a system of citing evidence that all people agree upon. I always say that when we're writing, we have certain symbols that we agree upon. We know a question mark means there's a question. We understand that a colon says that something important is going to come. We understand an exclamation point does just that. It's exclamatory. Those are rules that we follow and that we agree upon. The Modern Language Association, an association of scholars who have decided upon certain citation rules for scholars, and people who are citing and working in, through a variety of materials and need to give proper credit to them, they've agreed on some rules and we have to adopt them. And spacing matters. Your running header, which will be at the top of every formal paper, will have your last name, a space, and the page number. We will talk, and I can so go over with how you do these in class. It is no problem if you have questions about how to actually accomplish these things, but you need to know how to ask them and that you need to ask them. So also I noticed I've seen kids in the past put a dash here or I don't know, different things. Space and then the page number. Spacing matters in this situation. One of the biggest mistakes that drives me crazy is right here. When you are quoting, obviously you will get to the end of the quotation. There is no punctuation mark here, kids. Not at all. Just the closed quotation marks, space, a crucial space right here. Open parentheses, 82, close parentheses, or that's the page number, and then the final punctuation mark. One question lots of kids ask is, what if this is a question? Even though it looks weird, you will put the punctuation mark right here. So if it's a question mark or an exclamation, that also can go right here. One mistake I see repeatedly are kids who I think they think it's cool because it takes up space. It's not cool, it's distracting, is to put the author's name in every single parenthetical citation. Kids, once you have established in your introduction or in your opening sentence the authors you are dealing with, that's all you need. You don't need to say Hemingway page 1, Hemingway page 7, 3 sentences later, Hemingway page 9, Hemingway page 12. We know you're dealing with Hemingway. Once you have mentioned Hemingway's name, either in your introduction or in the first parenthetical citation, if you continue to cite from the same author, you will not include that name in subsequent citations. You will simply put just the page number. If you change authors, you will. But if you're not changing authors, you do not. Parenthetical citation, as we say, is generally at the end of the sentence. A lot of kids, when they first come to me in 9th grade, do a lot of on page 21, on page 43, it says this. That's what we're moving away from. Instead, we're going to ask you to use MLA format and in parentheses include the page numbers of the quotes or the material you have borrowed at the end of a sentence. And your works cited sheet must be exact. I will give you more resources soon about how to make sure that you do that works cited sheet correctly. I'm just going to make a few little comments for when you guys rewrite next week, but I want you to remember one of the biggest challenges for freshmen is choosing good evidence. I hear freshmen all the time and saying things like, oh, I've got to get some quotes. Can you help me find some quotes? Will you give me your quotes so I can put them into my paper? Do not do that. You are choosing evidence that when you analyze it helps to prove the point or support your assertions. And this right here, you guys, is where I make determinations about the quality of your reading, the quality of your quotation choice, etc. Simply looking through a book to choose quotations to plug into your paper and then sort of analyze them over time has a very disconnected, disjointed feel, and it's really not what you're trying to do. You're trying to walk your reader through an argument. So choose quotes that are meaty enough, that require some analysis and aren't just proving the obvious. I want you to remember that this kind of goes along with quote standing alone. Before you start to quote, I want you to give me the context, and I want it first. Who is speaking? To whom are they speaking? When are they speaking? Why are they speaking? Under what circumstances are they speaking? This, kids, is the context that allows you to embed your quotations into your own sentences. One of the most frustrating things ever is when a kid's like, boy, Santiago's really mean. Quote, Santiago kills the fish with his bare hands, end quote. This happens when Santiago, and then they give me the context after the quotation. Don't make me wait. You want me to follow your argument, so always give me the context first. Another thing we're going to be working on, and I'll just give you a little hint here, is you should never be saying anything like this quote shows, this quote proves, this passage demonstrates, this statement shows. We're going to look instead at a feature of the quotation you've chosen. Maybe it's the imagery in that line. Perhaps it's the tone of a speaker's voice. Perhaps it's the romantic diction or word choice in a particular quotation. you're always going to go back and tell us what the feature is in the quotation that you are going to analyze. Again, more on this next week in class when I give you another presentation that will help advance your writing. Again, quotations must be embedded without creating a grammatical error. Sometimes kids will get past this part, but they create comma splices or run-on sentences trying to embed quotations into their own sentences. More about that. One thing you might see in early writings, many of my poor kids do, is this notation. I will say something about an ROCS. This stands for a run-on comma splice. Most students know what a run-on is, but they don't realize what they're doing when they add a comma there. Here's an example from the 10th grade summer reading. As Winston sits in his area after being captured, O'Brien walks in with a guard holding a truncheon. Their conversation ensues, revealing the truth. "They've got you too," he cries out. Oh my goodness, so many problems here, I can't even tell you. First, let me point out that you have a complete sentence here. As Winston sits in his area after being captured, O'Brien walks in with a guard holding a truncheon. That is a complete sentence. This needs either a period, a comma, and a coordinating conjunction like and or nor button for, or one might indicate that this is a complete sentence by using a semicolon. I teach my kids, one day I'll show you the semicolon dance, that the semicolon is a period that acknowledges the end of an independent clause or sentence, but the comma underneath it says, I'm not quite ready. I want to connect these ideas. A lot of times kids will put these run-on comma splices about right here because they're trying to connect the sentences, but they create a grammatical error. This is also kind of messed up because this period should not be here, but it is too late for me to fix this slide right now. Another example from Oliver Twist. When Oliver is at the workhouse, he is being fed low-quality food and not very much of it at that. Ooh, that's a full sentence. When he asks for more, it puts the whole workhouse into a panic. This right here is a run-on and comma splice. You might know it's a run-on because you have two sentences here, that this is a full sentence here on its own. But the fact that a person put a comma here instead of a proper end punctuation, a period, a question mark, a colon, a semicolon, an exclamation point, they've used a comma here, creating a comma splice. Another example, while telling Rose about Oliver, Nancy tells her how much danger she is in. This is a better example of what I see more often. Trying to connect a quotation here, but look, this is already a complete sentence. While telling Rose about Oliver, Nancy tells her how much danger she is in. We need a better something here, period, colon, semicolon, comma, and a coordinating conjunction. If I told you what I have told you and led to their being taken, he would be sure to die. And there's the end quote. We will work with this a lot this year, and I will make sure that you avoid those. I went to college creating comma splices all the time and had never even heard the term. You guys will go to college wowing your professors. These are some examples from junior year. Edward preaches that God can cast you to hell anytime, so you must strive to be perfect in your faith. Hey, you guys notice right there all those yous? Notice also this is a complete sentence, an independent clause, and once again, comma splice to introduce this quotation. So there are some problems there. That could be period. He goes on to say, or to maybe be perfect in your faith, period. He goes on to threaten, quote, the bow of God's wrath is bent and the arrow made ready on the string. A couple other problems here, by the way. Just notice that there is no end quotation mark, which should have probably been here. Edwards is mentioned here, but it's also mentioned right here, so it's not necessary. There is no comma in a parenthetical citation like this. It would, if this weren't mentioned here, this Edwards, it would just be Edwards space 56. But either way, we should get rid of that whole Edwards. Uh-oh, that was screwed, messed up. And then this should have a period at the end. These are mistakes. Don't look at this as being an example of what to do. What's the problem here? In the first stanza, Taylor asks God for help and makes my soul. This is just needs context, and this is all awkward and weird, and I don't know what this is. I think I was using this to show kids. Oh my goodness, I keep doing that. I think when kids copy things from the internet, I get something like this. I don't know if this is like the page and the paragraph, but this is not MLA. And so whenever I see this, I know that you are not using your book or citing your book, you're citing the internet. Always a tip off when I then go to your works cited and see that you've cited the book that everyone else has used for pages. So just be careful, you guys, and remember what the purpose of citation is. It's for your reader to be able to go and find that same source. Okay. Ask yourself, is your evidence, analysis, and discussion proving what your thesis and topic sentence promise? Make sure you stay true to your purpose from the very beginning all the way to the end. Make sure you stay on topic throughout. If a person were to ask you, hey, what are you writing about? What's the purpose of your essay? What's the purpose of this paragraph? Can you answer, oh, the purpose of my paragraph is to prove that Santiago is a tragic hero. Oh, the purpose of my paragraph is to prove that Hemingway uses a variety of motifs to prove his theme that determination is the most important quality in a man, you see. Are you choosing the best quotations, or did you just try to look up something and find something to fill the space? Not a good plan if you're trying to do well. Is it possible for someone to argue against your thesis statement? If not, you've probably stated a fact. No one really wants to read a paper where you've just proven a fact or the obvious. We want you to prove something that, is arguable. And over time, you guys, the whole goal is for improvement. I know this whole presentation seems a little nitpicky and like I can imagine your eye rolls, but these are really the kinds of skills that set you apart from other students, other learners, other scholars, and it's why our kids do so well over time, is they just perfect these skills so they become completely rote. Thank you for your time. And that is all.